All right, we're live. All right. So Drew, thanks for joining us, man. So this is the first episode of our little podcast put together. You agreed to come on, and we really appreciate it.
Well, thank you for having me. It's great to see you both. Lauren, gorgeous as always. Derek, you're
Working on
holding up,
it.
so keep up the good work. But no, I
I
really
see he did his hair for this episode,
I like
I
it.
so
did.
this
It's a
Yep.
is
it's a new
this is
do.
big.
But no,
Hmm.
I'm very honored to be here on episode 1 of your podcast. I think you referred to me as the victim or the first victim. So hopefully I survive
Yes.
the next half an hour or 45 minutes here. But again, looking forward to our conversations today.
The best part about being the first is like even if it's terrible, nobody's gonna see it.
It's
So that's
true.
always great.
So
And
maybe
then
that's
like
why you asked me to go first.
exactly
You're
because
getting it. You're getting it.
we'll
Perfect.
just get to redo it on episode 10. We'll polish all the talking points down, and it'll be fine.
Perfect.
Cool. So let's go over your background, man. Like, so how did you get to where you are? Where did you come from? Give us that story because we talk to you every day. So, but our audience is zero right now. Probably doesn't know anything about you. So let's hear that story.
Sure. Let's enlighten them. Well, I won't go back too far, but I got involved kind of in the IoT space about 5 years ago. We were working, or I was working for a manufacturer of LED chips and components and light fixtures, Cree Inc. And I actually had the opportunity, Derek, to meet you. And you might not remember this, but we were at, I don't know why we were there or what the role I was in, but I met you um, in Denver, Colorado. And you got up in
Uh-oh.
front of the room and you just started talking for the better part of a half an hour. And I remember
Sounds about
being
right.
being
Yeah,
so
this sounds on brand, but go ahead.
sure, just being so blown away by what was coming out of your mouth and just everything about you, right? You showed up to a meeting in jeans and a t-shirt. Here I was, in like the standard, corporate attire, slacks and a button down with brown shoes. And you started talking about, IoT and kind of the future and AI. And I was like, this is pretty interesting. And I, at the time, thought I was pretty in tune with like, global events and world events and, you know, advancements in technology, but I was, surprised that I was way behind. Around that same time, we had launched a different lighting solution, if you recall, that was power over Ethernet. And coming from the lighting sales side of things, this was new, this was different, this was exciting, this seemed disruptive, right? And I jumped at the opportunity to learn as much as I could about that technology, that platform. And I basically spent, the next year and a half kind of evangelizing about other ways to do things that people have been doing the same way for 100 years, right? And um, again, I had the opportunity, I guess, a few years later, to get more engaged with you and work for you for several years. But that was kind of, I guess, the early introduction to IoT. And over the last 5 years, it's really evolved into what I'm doing now.
How it's a really interesting story. You talk about how you spent the last like few years evangelizing this technology. How was it received when you first started, and what are people saying now, and has that changed? Has the
Well,
feedback changed?
with that particular category, I don't know where that stands offhand. I can't imagine it has done well just because you don't hear about it a lot. But I'm also not as
Hmm.
in tune with that industry as I was at one point. But at first, it caught people's attention. It got me a lot of meetings, but it also didn't make me too many friends at the same time.
Mhm.
Right? You're basically coming into a space and trying to disrupt it, and it sounded cool, right? For lack of better words. But we had a hard time getting any traction with it.
Sure.
And at times it was frustrating, but with any new technology, and as I've learned more, you start to see that it does take some time for people to get comfortable with a different way of doing things and then ultimately adopting it and rolling it out.
Yeah, especially with the paradigm shift, like the PoE. So like Cisco had that UPoE standard, which was what, like 60 watts. They're going beyond 90 watts now, which is crazy. But there wasn't a contractor on the planet that had ever used something like that, right? So now you have to look at commercial building code, National Electric Code, what every contractor is currently doing, and the channel, and disrupt 5 pieces of a value chain all at the same time. It's hard. It's hard.
It
And then,
is. Yeah, and there
and
was
especially
actually
in that world.
yeah, one memory I have being in that space was presenting in front of the Electrical Associate Brotherhood of New York City, whatever that union's
The
called,
union.
to about 500 electrical contractors on this disruptive technology that ultimately could potentially put them out of business. And I was convinced that I was going to end up at the bottom of the East River with like bricks tied to my feet. But I survived because I knew what I was talking about. And once you educate somebody on any topic, right, and they kind of learn more about it, they became more interested in it and actually saw it as a potential another revenue path for them.
Sure.
So, yeah, and
I
that
guess
kind. Yeah, sorry, Lauren.
I was going to say, I'm curious. You've been in sales for a long time, and it sounds like you picked a path that was challenging, right? It's like you weren't making many friends at first. You were sort of an unpopular sales guy, which is kind of the opposite of what you want. So, what do you think it is about you that makes you want to choose that path? Because it would have been easier just to sell boring lighting, but you went another way.
Absolutely, and there's money there, there's stability there. I think it really came down to probably a small percentage of starting to get bored, not
Mm-hmm.
being challenged, and as you kind of watch the world go around you, there are other things out there, and you need to take some risks. And up until that point, or up until meeting Derek, and then eventually joining his team, I had more or less been doing the same thing for the better part of 12 years, right?
Mm-hmm.
The days were the same, the outcomes every couple of years were the same in terms of, good years, bad years, good years, bad years. But just kind of got a little dull, right? And I, being only in my, late 30s at this point, I just couldn't imagine doing that every day forever,
Mm-hmm.
right? So when this opportunity came up, to not only sell a different product, but to also join a different team and actually make some real change, was exciting to me, and I
Yeah.
have no regrets about it. And again, not to toot Derek's horn here, but what I was able to learn from you over the years has really set me up for the position I'm in now, and I think it's also shaped me as a person. So in that regards, I think I owe a lot to you, but that because we talk quite
Well,
frequently.
and this is why I had you on, because I needed someone to stroke my
Yeah.
ego to start this out. I was like, who can make me feel the best about myself that I
This is
possibly
making me
can?
rethink my guest list as well. I
Yeah,
need to
yeah, yeah.
start maybe with my mom, who's only going to compliment me.
More strategic than, yeah.
Yeah.
Fair
But no,
enough.
beyond the power over Ethernet stuff, that was an interesting way to just do connectivity. But on our team, when we started building like real Internet of Things devices, independent of if it connected power over Ethernet or not, like it was kind of interesting technology, kind of fun. But all of us, we were really focused on how do you do it wirelessly, how do you do it the traditional way, and how do you get the same level of bandwidth doing something like wireless mesh, Bluetooth mesh. What sensors can you connect? And that was really the prize for us. Like when you joined our team, it was like, how do we drive that? What use cases can we do? Can we do things like violence detection? Can we do things like, wayfinding? Can we make a big difference in healthcare? Like that started to be what was cool with that team
Absolutely.
versus
And just
how you
thinking back
connected it.
at some of those brainstorming sessions that we did as a team, they were exciting, right? There's so many use cases, right? And that's kind of part of why I really am happy with where I am now, is because every day somebody presents us with a new challenge, right? Can you do this? And the answer is yes. We just need to figure it out and be patient with us. But yeah, working on that team, I think it was good that we identified that wireless, was the path forward, right? And once we were all aligned there and had kind of our hypothesis kind of in the bag, right? We knew what we wanted to do. We tested things. We put together a plan and we executed, right? So excellent learning experience.
So you left Cree not too long ago and you started a new thing. Why don't you tell us where you're at now and what you're doing?
Yeah, so I left Cree in February and joined a company that I never had heard of before, based in Tel Aviv, Juganu. We're a small startup. I say startup, but we've been around for a few years. Our strategy has changed in the last couple of years, and based on some funding that we got more recently, we did kind of hit the refresh button, and so we we have started over, right? So in that regards, I would still consider us a startup. But in this role, and being employee number 2 in the U.S., the business card says, director of U.S. sales. But I've learned very quickly when you don't have the support structure as you do with a larger organization, especially on the same continent as you, right? You have to wear many hats, right? So I have become one hell of a marketer, which I never thought. I've had some help from my wife, and she's definitely put together some PowerPoints for me. But I've definitely, really buckled down in terms of some of the technical aspects of the solution to learn it, because I don't have the crutch of like a sales support engineer
Yeah.
or 10 nerds that are, a phone call away, right? I'm dealing with an organization that is 7 hours away, best case scenario, on a different schedule than us, right? Weekends are different; they don't overlap necessarily, and so either days start very very early or they start very late. So in the 8-ish or so months that I've been here, yeah, I mean, I've done some of the, and evangelical work, right? I've gone out and I've preached the gospel of Juganu. I made sales presentations. I presented to marketing organizations. I worked with our PR firm trying to put together material. I've been interviewing, potential engineering candidates, right? People that are, at least in my opinion, on paper, significantly smarter than me. And the questions I'm asking probably are relatively easy to them. And they know that I don't necessarily know the answer, but, I'm trying to learn more of this. So, honestly, sales has probably been the smallest of my focus, right? I'm sure the business would not want me to or hear me say that, but growing revenue will come, right? You just have to have
Mm-hmm.
the foundation and the building blocks first. So, Juganu's, I guess, basic mission statement, right, is that we have created an operating system with the goal to seamlessly digitize the physical world, right? So, what does that mean, right? And I guess I will answer that question. Um, our objective is to improve the environments we live and work in, and we actually do that through light. So, leaving Cree, I never thought I would end up in a different or with a different lighting company. We do things very different where we are, but the light fixture is our vehicle to deploy our technology, our AI, and our platform. It just happens to glow up, right, and
Mm-hmm.
make spaces nicer.
No, it's just a really interesting and convenient platform to connect things on, right? Because it's like it's everywhere people are, it's elevated, it's connected now with basic control systems, and then if you increase the bandwidth, use something like a wireless mesh or 5G, now it gets really really interesting, right? The sensors that you can put up there. So what use cases? What are the biggest use cases you guys are trying to solve right now?
Yeah, so my focus to date, and again, Juganu has kind of changed its focus over the last couple of years. We kind of got started with protecting a couple of highly contested borders, right? How can we make these borders safer? Then we were kind of approached with a few problems involving how do we get Wi-Fi to very very remote parts of the globe, where not only is electricity scarce, but it's there's a lot of other resources that they are lacking. So once they kind of got past those first couple of use cases, they've kind of shifted the focus more to lighting in the sense that, again, the vehicle, because it's everywhere, right? My focus and the US team's focus is primarily around smart city applications and smart retail. So, in a smart city environment, there are thousands of potential applications, not only for indoor but also for outdoor use, right? And the objective and the goal is to transform those spaces into smart spaces or to make cities somewhat smarter, right? I think we all can agree that you don't necessarily think of a city as being smart. Basic services, more or less, right? But in the smart city space, and I guess the use cases are endless in a sense, right? So step one, right? We want to be able to illuminate a particular space, right? We potentially could identify different objects, right? Is this a car? Is this a person? Is this a scooter? Right? Can we meter power, right? Are there other abnormalities that take place in a city that might be worth capturing, right? So
Mhm.
that could be like an environmental sensor of sorts, crime detection, lost or fall prevention, gunshot detection, and it's been interesting working with different cities across the country. There's not one single use case that really carries over to them all.
Hmm.
Every city has been different. Every municipality has approached us with a different set of problems, right? And so I get asked a lot, what does your solution come out of the box with? And that's not really the easiest of questions for me
Yeah.
to answer. And
It depends is the only answer, and
right,
that's not an answer that
and
people
it's
like.
software, right? What do you want it to do? What are your KPIs? What are you trying to measure, right? And once we can have that conversation, we can put together a solution and a platform that makes sense. For instance, we worked with a city in Pennsylvania, and are ongoing with them currently. What they want to do and what they're trying to deploy is very different than a city in Virginia. And you think about
Sure.
distance on a map, right? It's like an inch. It's not far.
Mhm.
Um, and then I guess I'll continue talking regarding the retail environment. I know retail took a pretty significant hit over the last 2 years or so, but really trying to better understand merchandising, right? We want to get a better feel for the customer journey. Where are they entering? What do people do when they enter a store? Are they going in just to buy milk, or are they going to buy a turkey sandwich, right? And you can learn a lot about a person and their behaviors based on, in this example, shopping behavior, right?
Mhm.
You have the ability to connect with brands, right? Brands like Coke or Pepsi really want to know not only how many cans of soda they're selling, because they know that already, but what are other people buying when they buy that product, right? Are they buying other brands under the Coke umbrella? And that's kind of the part that we're still trying to figure out. But then, even things like location of goods, right? We've all walked around the store, aimlessly forever, and a lot of stores now have apps that'll get you to an aisle, but then you're kind of shit out of luck and on your own. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
queue management, right? One of the things that we started tackling, Derek, in our former life was, how do you look at occupancy data and potentially free up
Yeah.
new lines at checkout, or open up new entryways at airports, right? So queue management, people counting, how many people are in a space, are people gathering, keyword detection, right, leading up to a potential fight. And then, a lot of people like to see this thing on a screen, right? So we could put it into a heat map or some type of UI that is very user friendly for the average person to be able to read and understand.
Yeah, no, that's awesome.
Yeah, no, I was just going to ask because, we get this sort of dialogue going a lot with our existing clients, which is like they know they need to adopt a lot of these things, a lot of things that Juganu can, implement. But I think where a lot of people get stuck is like, that seems really overwhelming. How do I go about doing it? Are people coming to you sort of saying, hey, we want to like start the smart city initiative, or we want to really get more data on our customers in retail? And are you having to make that case, or are you having to make that case?
Yeah, and it's a combination of both. So there's definitely us selling our solution to these
Mm-hmm.
to these partners. But like in the smart city application, and if you look at any of the smart city bids that have come out, it's just a laundry list of anything and everything IoT.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, all right, guys, what you want to do is possible. It's probably not going to be able to be done by one vendor like you're asking for it to be
Yeah.
done.
Right.
And it's going to be very, very expensive, right? Like you have no idea what the stuff is going to cost. Like let's narrow that list from 100 down to 5, and then we can build on it from there, right? Retailing, the retail side, it's taken more of the sales process to kind of get in there.
Mm-hmm.
Cities are looking at ways to get more tourists, make you feel safer, right? I mean, there's so many examples there, but retail is still trying to figure out what's the best fit for them, and also what the future of retail, at least the shopping experience, is going to be. And we've seen that shift dramatically over the last 5. When did Amazon start selling stuff online? 10 years ago, 15 years ago? Um,
20.
yeah,
Long
right.
time, yeah.
Yeah.
So
But even you and I we've talked with Walmart store number 8, right? And some of the crazy stuff that they're doing there, like even in our previous life and even now in our current lives. And it's fascinating to see what they're doing. And they're looking at like the Walmart stores, not only as how do I improve the experience for the end customer that's coming in, that's shopping, how do I get them the things they want in the best way possible, but for their own employees that are pulling orders for delivery, right? Like you never really think about that as a use case, but you might have an employee there that has to pull 5 people's orders and package them to get them ready for delivery, door-to-door delivery that day. And being able to optimize that flow through the store and being able to detect which things sell with which things, so we can get them closer and get them more get more of a speedy, expeditious process for that person to yank as many things as possible. Like these are all interesting use cases, and where AI and ML come into play, it's like infinite levels of optimization, right? To be able to make the human experience a little bit better, be able to take things that are not so intuitive and connect those dots to be able to get better outcomes, right? We always talk about that, how we're moving from product-based world to an outcome-based world.
absolutely. And that's a good point. And it kind of has me thinking about, competition in a sense, right? Competition in all aspects is getting stronger. And the thing that
Mhm.
interests me the most about competition is that history means nothing there,
Yeah.
right? What you did 6 months ago or a year ago or 30 years ago doesn't matter, right? And it's very important for businesses, cities, retailers, Juganu, right, to have a strategy. And I don't think most companies have a strategy, right? Um, I think managers are confused about competition, right? And that aspect of things. I think a lot of people think about competition as being the guy that sells the exact same thing as you. And part of what I've been doing is trying to help some of these organizations figure out what their strategies are. And it's almost by trial and error, right? What's important to you today might not be important to you tomorrow. We're very familiar with that, right? In terms of the use cases that come up today versus what's discussed tomorrow.
No, it makes a lot of sense. Yeah, and it's like in a real competitive environment where you're competitive, like you said, competitors aren't selling the exact same thing, but they're selling a different way to do something. They're selling a different outcome or a more effective way to do it. It's like the rent on innovation is due every day, or else you end up getting flattened, which is kind of,
Exactly.
it's a tough world to be in, especially now. It's like we talk about this a lot with clients. It's like you're gonna have two kinds of companies left: the ones that are fast, agile, and adopt AI, adopt data-driven strategies, test and iterate, and then the ones that don't exist anymore. There's gonna be nobody in the middle.
Exactly.
So you touched on what you're doing right now, some of the cool use cases, and you've kind of tangentially touched on what that future looks like. So smart city, like you and I have nerded out about what smart city, what the city of the future looks like, and what the ramifications of the connected city are, like traffic and parking, how that kind of starts to go away or get optimized. So what do you think the future looks like here?
Great question. And I knew that this would come up, right? So I guess related to AI, right? It's safe to say it's not going anywhere, right? And it's not going to decline. Pretty broad, non-creative answer there. But we do need to see more investment in this space, right? And I was actually reading something recently, I think it was from Forbes, that talked about how investment in AI and new technology slightly declined during COVID because, frankly, people were just trying to figure out how to keep themselves alive, right?
Yeah.
Um, but I think the one thing we can't argue with, right, is that AI and data improves productivity, safety, and the health of individuals, right? Everyone today, I'm thinking of like some of the business school examples that we talk about, right? Autonomous cars, digital therapeutics, implanting something in your head so that it'll tell you if you're getting sick or whatever
It's
it may
like
be.
what Neuralink, that Elon Musk brand. Yeah.
Exactly, right. But we do know that compute power will continue to improve, right? What's that? Moore's law, maybe.
Yep.
Um,
Yep.
and then I think something that probably interests you a lot, Derek, is quantum computing, which is what you kind
Yeah.
of were just alluding to, right? In terms of like where Juganu is going, I think that is still to be determined, right? I think we know what we want to do, but it's really going to be driven by what our customer base says. And as of right now, that's ever changing. Luckily, we have some good partners that have developed some pretty interesting technology that have improved kind of our solution, right? I'm thinking of the Comcast and the Qualcomms of the world, right? But I don't know. I'd love to hear your take actually on that.
No, think you nailed it a little while ago when you were saying like it's not going anywhere. And what you mean by that is it's not going away, right? Like
Yeah.
I think we've always talked about how the future consists of more connected things tomorrow than yesterday. So like the Internet of Things is going crazy. Like we have trash cans that are connected to the internet downtown now,
Yep.
right? That let you know when the lid's propped open, so you know when you can come pick them up, so you don't have um, a terrible situation of just garbage everywhere, waiting for Tuesday or whatever trash day is to come pick it up. Um, it's going to be interesting when you have true self-driving cars and you don't have to go park them downtown, right? Or you
Exactly.
don't have to take an Uber. Like you get dropped off to dinner, your car runs a couple ride shares for you while you're at dinner, and then it comes and picks you up. It just changes the landscape of a downtown environment because you don't need as much parking, right? Like little things like that get interesting. Just yeah, the art of the possible gets wild. And
I think just speaking as someone who's probably the least technical person here, more of a marketer, when you talk about these things, I think they sound awesome, but I think the other side of that is fear because it's like, ooh, that's kind of
yeah,
like big brothery, a little creepy. How do you guys mitigate people saying that sort of stuff and talking about the awesome benefit? Like the benefits is great, but is there a downside, and how do you guys work around that?
the
Yeah.
scariness of robots taking over.
Yeah, and Lauren, great question, and that's something we get asked a lot. So whenever you put a camera in something, it has the ability to, watch people in a sense, right?
Mm-hmm.
And one of our capabilities is facial recognition, right? We have the ability to find people, cars, read a license plate if we so choose, or if our customer wanted to do that. You're not going to see that, I don't think, anytime soon in a city application or environment. It's a feature that we've not turned on for the few projects that we've deployed. That has been like the number one sticking point. You still have um, camera access in the sense that it's grayed out, right, and you can basically
Mm-hmm.
see the silhouette. So hey, that's a person, that's approximately 6 feet tall and 250 pounds, and that's a dog. Um,
You're
uh,
doing object recognition, but
exactly.
it's anonymous. Yeah,
Right.
Yeah.
And but in the retail environment, where you're voluntarily going into a store to
Mm-hmm.
buy something, kind of the rules are off the table, right? Yes, you might have to agree to let them keep an eye on you, right? But we're starting to see some interest in college campuses, right, where safety and security is a big
yeah,
concern, right? So if you opt in to kind of being tracked, right, if something were to go wrong or something were to make you nervous at night, keyword detection or even some hand gestures could, send attention, to Lauren, on the quad,
Mm-hmm.
right? But we
Mm-hmm.
get we get asked a lot about that, right? People are very uncomfortable with AI. I think a lot of what their uncomfortableness is related to is what they see in movies, right? And
yeah.
Yeah.
as cool as that is, we're not there yet. I don't think. But I think with time we could get there. We need to kind of keep an eye on how things progress and evolve over time.
No, that's interesting, and yeah, it's like the not being there yet part. It's like people are right now they get afraid of AI taking over completely, the robots coming in and taking over, and then it's like what the reality of AI is. You showed a picture of a dog and it classifies it as a cat,
Yeah,
right? Like
Mm-hmm.
that's kind of where we're at still. Compute power, as compute power gets cheaper and cheaper, and like compute at the edge gets cheaper and cheaper and faster and more effective, we're going to see some really really interesting use cases. But the people deploying it, the leaders in the space, benevolence is going to be a real big important thing.
That was my thinking too. It's like, the technology hasn't caught up to what's possible. So I think a lot of it is education. And then, you know, it sucks that you have to rely on people just being naturally good and not wanting to
Yeah,
do harm. But that's sort of how all technology is, right? And we've seen that in so many
yeah.
areas. But
And even something as basic as people counting, right? We've been
mhm.
asked, hey, are your algorithms correct? Is this data accurate? And we think it is, right? It looks good on our end, but the best way to measure that is to send somebody out with a clipboard and a
yeah,
counter, right?
yeah,
I mean, that's still kind of where we're at in some regards.
Yeah.
yeah. And like even people counting is an interesting use case. So yeah, you can see how spaces are occupied, and we talked about the healthcare one a lot,
Yeah,
right? That use case for me is really important because you think about all these healthcare facilities. What's not obvious, and you know this better than anyone, is hospitals operate at like single points of margin. Like people look at the cost of healthcare and they think, oh gosh, hospital networks are probably bringing in 30, 40 points of margin. It's like four points sometimes. And when you think about the amount of waiting room space, I don't remember the exact number, but it's like 20% of a hospital is like waiting room space where you're not actually helping anyone, just people are sitting there.
Yeah.
And the use cases are like, if you can more effectively utilize your space, more effectively utilize the traffic flow through the facility, know when customers or patients are coming in, get them to where they need to be on the time schedule that's most effective,
You can have a
let
smaller
them know
waiting
of delays.
room.
Yeah, you can shrink the waiting room spaces down and utilize that for actual healthcare facilities. And if you can get a 1% boost to margin for that health
It's huge.
hospital network, that's huge. That's
And
huge
that's
because they're
gonna
already at 4 points.
and that's gonna take some time, right? Because you're gonna have to design and spec these new spaces in, right?
Sure. Yeah.
Because you're gonna, the story will be, well, we need 30 seats in the waiting room because that's the way we've been doing it for 50
Yeah.
years, right? We've all been to the doctor where all 30 seats have been occupied, and other
Yeah.
times where you've been the only one there, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, excellent point.
Yeah, either way, I think they're like the short term use cases are interesting and they're fun and they're going to show some really good wins. But then like that art of the possible gets really rad. And then when you start talking about quantum computing, there's a book I just read called Parallel Universes. Pretty interesting if you're into that kind of stuff. We promised we wouldn't talk about aliens or the multiverse, so I'll stay away from it. But it talks about what happens when you have access to that level of compute power, and it's fascinating. And like the people that are afraid of it, we work with marketing teams, and marketing teams are sometimes gun shy. But when you look at it, it's kind of like 100 years ago, you had a lot of people who were farming, right? And then as you have things like technology comes into agriculture and you get a combine harvester, it changes the amount of effort that you need to produce the amount of food for the people that you're providing for. So when you start using data tools, you can slowly start shifting the load. It's like a combine harvester for some of these new use cases, right?
Yeah, and just even like thinking about data, right? Like there's a couple of examples that come to mind in terms of how we're looking at data and kind of what we realized through data, right? For starters, our manufacturing needs improvement, right? And that's pretty obvious just based on some of those basic numbers, right? We need more investment, right? We need to spend money on branding and marketing, right? And again, this is all feedback that we're getting from data, right?
Sure.
Um, you need an additional investment in R&D, right? Larger staff, right? Being a small 100-person company, we're going through some of the similar growing pains that we all experienced in our former life, 7, 8 years ago.
Sure. Yeah, taking a business from $10 million to $1 billion is big work, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, when you get to the point of needing help on your data driven marketing strategies and you want to deploy AI on that, just give me a call.
I know who to call.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, that's
I
awesome.
am curious though, like, you've worked at a few large organizations before, and now you're really bootstrapped and like working at a startup and you're wearing a million different hats, like you said. How has that process been for you? Like, I'm sure you've learned a ton, but how do you prefer that lifestyle over sort of the more corporate vibes?
I think I'm getting more comfortable with it, right?
Yeah.
You obviously know me well.
Hmm.
The team I work with now gave me a hard time for the first couple of weeks for my dress code, right? I was still a little more formal than they were used to,
Yeah,
which has made for good jokes, 6, 8 months
Sure.
later. Um, but having worked, for corporate America for 16 years, right, there was always so much structure and reporting, right? And not that there's not that here, it's different.
Yeah.
I'm really starting to get comfortable with working for a smart up or a startup. But yeah, it's taken a little time.
Yeah.
And
the
the hours
structure and
are,
reporting is
yeah.
less important than accomplishing what needs to be done to meet the goal and objective, right? In a
Yeah.
startup,
And as a small company, we have a couple of very simple goals, right? Grow this thing um, to become attractive enough to somebody to buy it, right? And everybody on the team, whether that's the person at the front desk or the guy designing this stuff, or me in the U.S. trying to sell this stuff, right? Um, so I think it helps that we're all aligned, where you don't necessarily see that vision in a large corporate company.
yeah. Yeah, I think a lot of people in big companies, they get to the point where like, well, this is my job, this is my role, I get to leave at this time, and
Yeah.
then I go back the next day and I just accomplish that one role or that thing,
Yep.
right? They have their job, it's just a job to them. Whereas
Hmm.
in a startup, like you all have to be marching in the same direction towards the same goal because it's literally life and death.
Yeah,
Like
and I think I
you got,
got pretty good exposure to that, working on the IoT team with you,
yeah,
right? We didn't have a set structure, right? We had, goals that we all wanted to accomplish, but we were basically kind of left on our own to figure them out, right?
yeah.
And I think that prepared me well for this new role.
And then we built
Awesome.
that whole team, engineering and marketing and product, all based on Agile. Like
Yeah,
these are the overall
Hmm.
arching goals we're all trying to accomplish. These are the things that the tasks we're doing every day that map to those goals. And then we put all the data systems in place to make sure that our efforts were mapping to a positive result to get to that goal, right? It's like in a big company, you might not necessarily do that. But I think we're seeing more and more that large companies have to get fast. A guy I used to know, I've talked to him today a little bit. He always used to say, it's not the big that eat the small, it's the fast that eat the slow. And that's like resonated with me ever since. Like I think about that every single day. Like every day that I'm feeling lazy, I'm like, nope, can't do it. Can't
yeah,
gotta
that's a
step
good
on the
point.
throttle. Trying to think what else we want to talk about, man. We're coming a little bit over time, so I don't want to hold you too long. We really appreciate you being here. But is
Yeah.
there anything else you wanted to talk about or promote? And then we have a question we want to close with.
Um, no, I think this has been an excellent discussion. I mean, we could probably, do this for another couple of hours as we've
Yeah.
done, countless Fridays and many, many nights, right?
Hmm.
But no, I guess I'll turn it over to you to ask the final one.
Yeah, I guess well, this is our favorite question that we just like to ask people in general. But if you could have dinner with like 18-year-old version of you or 25-year-old version of you, what would you say and what would you talk about?
I probably would have to go back to 18-year-old Drew and tell him to slow it down a little bit,
Hmm.
to get a little focused, right? I think like most 18-year-old kids, maybe not most, but at least me, like I had no idea what the future had for me, right? I didn't know what I wanted to do. I probably would advise that individual or that younger version of me to take my studies a little more serious, right? Versus say the social aspect of things, right? But I was thinking about this question today for a while, because it's interesting, right? I think there'd be benefits, to both age groups, but at least at 25, I was kind of on a trajectory that got me to where I am today. Where 18, it was pretty loose, right? The step after high school was go to college because that's just what you did, right?
Hmm.
Um, and once you were there, all of a sudden you had to decide within a year what you wanted to do when you grew up, right? And I just, from maturity level, wasn't there yet. So would love the chance to sit down with that kid and just kind of talk to him a little bit.
Awesome. And I
Sounds
guess
great.
yeah, just like slow it down, man.
Yeah,
You gotta change the direction you're moving in, or else it's
yeah, and also just to pick something that interests you, right?
yeah,
Find a topic, find something that you're passionate about, which I think it took me till I was 34, 33 to really figure that out, right?
yeah,
That would
yeah,
have taken
sure,
me back to 2016.
yeah. That's awesome. And then I guess one last one, real quick. Like, are there any good books, podcasts, movies, anything you're really listening to these days that you're enjoying?
All right. So, not many podcasts. I think the only one that I religiously listen to is Joe Rogan, which I
Sure.
think we all share a mutual interest
Hmm.
there. Um, if the movie is not Disney, I have not seen it in years. But I do get some time to myself occasionally to read or listen to a book on tape. So I'm trying to think. The last few books I finished. American Kingpin about the Silk Road, which was interesting. I read a book called Chaos, which was about Charlie Manson and the murders, and
Hmm.
how it was directly connected to the CIA for those conspiracy theorists out there. Pretty interesting book, really great, easy read.
Hmm.
1.5 on your speed, and you're through it pretty quickly.
Mhm.
Um, I actually recently went back and read Innovator's Dilemma again because it had been several
Yeah.
years since I had kind of read through that one. I'm just looking here at my bookshelf. I read a Bill O'Reilly book, Killing the Mob, which was
Oh
interesting.
yeah, it's
Um,
good.
yeah, it was a mindless exercise on a
Mhm.
couple of plane rides.
Sure.
And then I read a book on the Grateful Dead called So Many Roads,
Oh,
Hmm.
cool.
which was kind of different.
We should ask Drew this question since he loves music so much. What's your hype song?
Oh wow!
Like if you had to walk on, walk on home plate, your at bat song.
I've thought about this a million times in my life, and I think it changes. Uh, I guess first off, I've accepted the fact that I'll never, be a professional baseball
I'm
player.
sorry. Yeah.
Right, yeah, it's okay. After watching,
Condolences.
yeah, I watched the World Series, right? I kind of feeling it last night, and was kind of judging some of those walk up songs, right? It's like, wow,
Mm-hmm.
this is
Yeah.
what this guy's into. But no, there are several songs that I could probably find, through a small catalog that probably had some Widespread Panic in it, or Fish,
Mm.
or the Grateful Dead, right? And you guys know my music hobbies there. Um, but yeah, I think it just depends on the mood or whatever live version of that song was most recently played.
Now I'm knowing what 18-year-old Drew looked like. Just
Yeah,
envisioning it now.
got it.
Played
Putting it all together.
lacrosse, had a hacky sack, had an
Um,
iPod full of Dispatch.
yeah, yeah, good days. But yeah, well, this has been a lot of fun.
Cool. Well, Drew, thanks, man. Thanks for joining us. Really appreciate it. What day is today? Today's Wednesday, but yeah, I'm sure we'll talk Friday, like
Perfect.
always.
Looking
Yeah.
forward to it.
Again, thanks for being the first guest. We really appreciate it, and yeah, hopefully you get to join us again after we
Once we've
After
get some
figured
of the
all of
kinks
this
worked
out.
out.
yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. We'll
perfect.
get there.
All right, gang. Good talking to you.
Thanks,
Awesome.
Drew.
Thanks.
Bye.
See you later, Drew.